Our next speaker is Sue Bolton, women's rights activist from Social Alliance and editor of Green Left Weekly. Sue will be responding to the Pope's attitude towards gay people, abortion and condoms. Welcome pilgrims. Hello, welcome to our lovely city.
Socialist Alliance is supporting these protests all around the country, and when the New South Wales government introduced its $5,500 fine if you wear an annoying t-shirt which will cause annoyance to the Pope, or a demonstration that will cause annoyance to the Pope, that led to demonstrations happening in most capital cities around Australia. So that's a great sign by Australian people. So we supported these protests around the country, beginning in Sydney, not because we're against freedom of speech. I support the freedom of speech and freedom of thought. I'm against what the government is doing to the 13 Muslim men in Barwon prison, who do have right-wing religious views that I disagree with, but they're in prison on terrorism charges for a crime of thought, not a crime of action. What we're here protesting about today is not just the fact that the Pope has right-wing views toward anti-woman, anti-gay and anti-contraceptive views, but he puts those views into practice through using all the wealth and institutional strength of the Church to force governments around the world to implement those views. And it's not just a, gentle coffee table discussion about these views. These views are actually causing death and misery. They're not just uncomfortable views that we have to hear, they're actually causing the deaths of millions of people around the world. That's what I'm opposed to. Because I'm an atheist, I'm a proud atheist, but I'm not against people's right to hold religious views. And in fact in Sydney, there are some Catholic groups and some religious groups that are supporting the protest in Sydney that are fighting for change within their church. First, the Catholic Church's view on contraceptives. Apart from the fact that it causes unwanted pregnancies and backyard abortions, the statistics of people living with AIDS, 33.2 million people. Children living with HIV and AIDS, 2.5 million people. Africa has 12 million AIDS orphans. Where is the humanity in the Pope's opposition to the use of condoms and contraceptives? Despite this, it's not just that the Catholic Church has argued it's viewed in the media, but it's threatened governments throughout the world and used its big business connections to force governments to stop funding family planning and contraceptive programs right throughout the world, and it's had influence in the Howard government, and there would be elements in the Rudd government pushing for this as well. So that has resulted in a whole number of family planning programs throughout the world being defunded by the United States, causing the deaths of how many people? How many people would have been killed by this anti-contraceptive approach of the Catholic Church? Then you get to the issue of abortion. 46 million pregnancies terminated each year, and 19 million of them are illegally terminated, mostly unsafe. At the moment in Latin America, I don't know the figures for around the world, but there are several hundred women languishing in prison as a result of having a backyard abortion. What sort of crime is that when you look at war criminals like Pinochet in Chile, in the same country where there are 22 women in prison, and Pinochet never went to jail for all of his crimes? In war-torn countries such as Congo and Sudan, although not the only places, where women are systematically raped as part of war, women have no access to having abortions. That has led Amnesty International, which has previously not supported abortion as a human right and still doesn't, but in those particular situations, Amnesty did start to talk about the need for women to have access to abortion. Well, since then, the Catholic Church, but it's not only the Catholic Church, other churches as well, have condemned Amnesty and threatened to pull their members out of Amnesty if Amnesty persists with this policy. So there's an active campaign. It's not just the Pope's thoughts, there's an active campaign. And in Victoria, we're about to have a debate, a public debate around the issue of abortion, around the question of decriminalising abortion. Now, there are three options being put forward to the parliamentarian. Only one option decriminalises abortion. Now, you can bet your bottom dollar that the Catholic Church and a number of other churches and the Right to Life will be systematically campaigning. And everyone here, I invite everyone to support the campaign for a women's right to choose. It's very important. It's not just for women, it affects men as well. We all need to support this basic human right. And then you get to the question of homosexuality in the church. How damaging is the church's attitudes, anti-homophobic attitudes? Well, here again, it's not just that anti-homosexual attitudes in society cause depression amongst gay people, but there are a lot of suicides, especially amongst teenagers. Teenagers who realise they're gay and commit suicide because they've got no social support. And in fact, the people who are most likely to commit suicide who are gay are people who either live in country areas or they're lower income groups, or people who have no social support for their right to express their own sexuality as they choose. So there again, it's not just that the church has a bad attitude, but it's actually causing the death and destruction of a lot of people through suicide, through its anti-homophobic attitudes. And then Lynn Allison has already talked about the fact that, the church is penetrating society. As the government defunds public services, welfare organisations, and puts them in the hands of charities, then it means that those charities are based on religious principles. I'd like to end with one old feminist slogan from the early 70s, which is, "Not the church, not the state, women must decide their fate." I'd like to suggest, given we're taking up a range of issues where the church's attitudes, when they're put into practice, are devastating for human beings, so I'd like to suggest that we start a chant. Not the church, not the state, we must decide our fate. Not the church, not the state, we must decide our fate. Not the church, not the state, we